Welcome to Your Lifestyle is Your Medicine podcast with me, Ed Paget. Today, I get to speak with Dr. Sally Bell. Dr. Sally Bell is a UK-trained GP, means she went to medical school in the UK, but she has a specialism in lifestyle medicine. She qualified back in 1999, but she traveled and worked in different countries before coming back to the UK and running a very busy inner city practice. However, she had a personal health crisis, which forced her to look deeper at the root cause of illnesses and injuries. And from that, she developed a 5-part process. She looks at nutrition, movement, sleep, rest, and connection. In this episode of Your Lifestyle is Your Medicine, we're going to explore her story and what she did to heal herself and what she now does with her patients. We're going to look at how these principles of lifestyle medicine can be used by the general public to avoid many of the chronic diseases that now plague our society. You're going to like this one. So Dr. Sally Bell, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, Ed. It's good to be with you in spirit. We are a long way away from each other, but sharing heat, I think, because it's 38 degrees here in the UK.
Yeah, and you're in my like my spiritual home, UK. I'm actually going there in a couple of weeks. But you're right, I am in Nicaragua. So you guys are having a heat wave, is that right?
Yes, we're having a mini heat wave, highest temperatures ever on record. We're kind of just hitting 40 degrees, which I think the highest we've ever recorded is 37. So it is feeling a little bit hot.
Wow, that is hot. And the UK melts when it gets that hot. Okay.
Yeah, we're
not here to discuss the weather. Although two Brits talking, we could talk about the weather.
Always talk about the weather first and be polite before we take the deep dive.
That's right. That's very, very British. Okay, what I want to talk to you about is your journey. Really, you're a GP trained in the UK, and you were working within the National Health Service there. But more recently, you've transitioned out of that into private medicine and lifestyle medicine. So maybe you can take us back to the beginning of your experience within the NHS and what happened and what you learned.
Yeah, I think my story probably starts all the way back in medical school, really. I remember being a medic in my first and second year, and you learn all about how totally brilliant the body is. Like, we are genetically wired to heal. We have all these amazing, complex, innate systems that keep us happy and keep our weight stable and moderate our sugars. And, we really are wired for longevity and healing and for feeling good. And I remember then you get to the third year, and it's like they chuck you out on the wards, and it's almost like just forget all that. Now put people into a disease categorization and follow these guidelines, which are often very pharmaceutically driven. And it felt so unintuitive. It just felt illogical, and that we would be treating diseases, not people, and just not looking at the whole of who people were. We were just treating a part. And so, but I was in my early 20s, and what did I know? And wasn't particularly confident in my voice back then. And so went with it, did the training. I trained as a general practitioner for those outside the UK. That's kind of our community family doctor. And I loved it. I loved being part of community. It's always been very much at the heart of who I am, that sense of being part of a community. I went away to Africa for quite a few years doing aid work, and came back in 2008 and worked in an inner city general practice. It had some of the highest rates of poverty, and totally fell in love. So many asylum seekers, so many different languages. It was just a total labor of love. I loved it. But in my time of being away, a whole host of things had happened to our system, where we had really lost continuity of care with this big pressure to see patients same day. And whereas when I first started training, I would have known grandma, and I would have known, your auntie, and I've probably known when you were born. And we just lost all of that. And it was, by the time I left general practice in 2016, it was 10 minutes, a patient, 40 patients a day. I wouldn't know them, they wouldn't know me. And when you sort of start to consider that actually after cancer and cardiometabolic diseases, our safe prescribing is the third cause of death in this country, it really does beg the question, like, am I honouring that Hippocratic oath of doing no harm when there's so much pressure to prescribe? And so I was deeply frustrated with the system, didn't feel I was helping people. And I say to people, I felt like a pharmaceutical vending machine. People come in, it's like ding, 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 here's your blood pressure drugs, here's your, diabetes drugs. And if you don't have a diagnosis, let's wait long enough for you to be sick enough, and then you'll fit into a diagnosis and we can medicate you. And so it just felt so unsatisfied and unsafe. And then, like so many of us, you do have to interrupt me because I've gone for ages.
Yeah, no, I just want to interrupt you there if possible. So just like what I'm picking up from that is, you had this experience in medical school, which told you how amazing the body was, but then told you the only way to treat it was with drugs. Yeah. Something happened when you were in general practice where the connection with the individual changed. Was that a policy change, or or what happened with the timings or something like that? Because you said it was good, and then it changed to 10-minute per.
So if you go back to the 90s, like there was definitely a sense of community, and
right.
An awkward question that you asked just as you're leaving my consultation, I could say, look, just book in 2 weeks, we'll pick up on it, and there'll be a sense of trust and a sense of building relationship. And then when I was away in those early noughties, there was such a pressure and a demand on general practitioners that people were waiting weeks and weeks to be seen for urgent problems. And so their solution was that we changed the structure, and we had to leave so many appointments for same day appointments. But in doing that, we lost all those continuous appointments where we could follow up. So the whole thing was rejigged from above. And it just left us, just seeing, our patients went from being our community to strangers, and we lost that continuity of care.
And so then the third leading cause of death is this iatrogenic medicine, which is basically it's brought about by the act of seeing a doctor. The interaction of a doctor, whether it's pharmaceutical or surgical or whatever, can cause an outcome that we don't want, which is death. So there you are as a general practitioner prescribing pharmaceuticals, noticing this pattern, and so that's kind of what I was picking up on. You must have felt this tension between these pills and potions and the pharmacological way of treating, and these amazing results you're getting, but also on the flip side, the not so amazing results. Is that right?
Yeah, totally. And like, I am not anti-modern medicine. It totally has a place. Like, I've worked for years in Africa where, children have died in my arms from treatable conditions. Like, I am not anti-pharma. Like, it has a place. Like, modern medicine is a wonderful thing. But really, if you look over the last 20 years, that plateau into that sort of curve of how it's improved life has really plateaued. And you have to ask the question, what has it contributed over the last 20 years, really? And that comes to kind of, my next kind of Damascus Road experience, really, in that I lost my own health, had weird and wonderful symptoms, kept going to my GP and being told that all my bloods were normal. I mean, on reflection now, I know what I know, they weren't. And just get, just a pat on the back and manage your stress. And then I had a moment where I was on the treadmill in the gym and I couldn't coordinate my legs anymore on the treadmill. And I went back to my doctor. I said, look, this isn't normal. And, thank God for the NHS. I went through the system. I had my scans. I saw a neurologist and got given a long-term diagnosis and drugs. And I had this moment with my neurologist where I was like, I don't feel like you're telling me what's wrong with me. Like, what's going on in my body? Like, what can I do to help myself get better? And he didn't even look up. He pushed a prescription across the desk and he said, look, here, Sally, take this. I'll see you in 3 months. And it was the tipping point for me, as well as all that frustration. And I went, right, I'm going back to the books. I know my body is wired to heal. Like, what do I need to do? And as I did that, I had to go to America because at that point, there was no lifestyle medicine stuff going on over here. And really the closest thing that helped me unravel my teaching and look at the problem differently was functional medicine. And so did some training with them. And then started to realize that, this burden of chronic disease that we're faced as Western nations, anything from your autism to your Alzheimer's, your cardiometabolic diseases and heart disease and diabetes and obesity or autoimmune diseases, all of these things, when you look under the hood, what you realize, depending on disease, causation is anything sort of 60 to 90% say is lifestyle. It's not genetic. Yeah. And it's total, you don't need a medical degree. Lifestyle problems require lifestyle solutions, and to keep medicating it is total lunacy. And that's how I recovered my own health very quickly, and I started practicing on anybody that let me have a go. Like at the end of surgery, I was like, do you want to stay a little bit longer and we can look at these a different way? And then people started getting better, and I was really surprised. Things that actually I'm told shouldn't get better started getting better. And I was totally hooked. I fell back in love with medicine. This is what I came in to do, was to heal. And it started the journey for me around developing my experience in lifestyle medicine, which has changed hugely compared to the 8 to 10 years ago that I started. And has transformed my own life and the life of many patients. So totally in love with it.
Can we go back a little bit? Is it helpful to share with people what your diagnosis was when your legs weren't working on the treadmill? What did they say it was?
It's interesting. There was a big question about MS, but I didn't have enough plaques and I didn't quite fit the diagnoses. And so they decided to give me a diagnosis of chronic migraine without headaches, which was a total new thing to me. But I was suffering 15 to 17 days a month where I couldn't function. And so it was having a massive impact. It was all a lot of weird neurological symptoms. Yeah. I wouldn't be able to word find. I had terrible brain fog. I would feel like things were crawling on my skin. I would struggle to coordinate my legs when I was really tired. So it wasn't really classic. And then I got given the usual drugs and ended up on anti-epileptics, and then just felt spaced out the whole time. And so that was where I was at with that.
Okay, so you had these these neurological symptoms of no known cause. You were taking a series of pharmaceutical drugs to help with them, but that wasn't doing it for you. So you went to the US and researched this functional medicine approach.
And that helped give me a framework to work.
And so what was it that you did with your lifestyle that helped you recover?
Yeah, I mean, up until that, I had lost my baby weight and I was very active at the gym. And so I'd done everything I thought was healthy. Interestingly, I was following what I would have considered a healthy diet, low fat, low calorie, and so I think the biggest thing that's changed for me initially was understanding how ultra processed our food was, and really switching to what we now know. Back then, even 10 years ago, we didn't really have an understanding of the gut microbiome and how to eat for a happy gut, but now we do. And it was about, I went on a big plant slant. I still kept meat and actually, when I could tolerate it, things like liver, these very nutrient dense foods, a very diverse diet. I started to time restrict my eating, and that had a massive impact on the neurological symptoms and energy. And then I think, added to that, I realized that I had bought into this concept that body mind was different. And when I started to engage that, the body and mind are one, and that actually some of the things that I felt in my physical body could be rooted in emotional trauma and my unresolved emotions. And I'm a feeler, so I'd feel a lot of my patient's pain and I would carry it and process it. But when I started to realize that some of my physical feelings were rooted in that, and started to develop practices that helped me deal regularly with what I was seeing emotionally and some of my own trauma in the past, and I married up that story, that was a real game changer in terms of my maturity and getting better and growing as kind of a human being, I think. But yes.
So those symptoms you were having, which sound like quite severe, if someone came to you as a doctor and said, I've got these symptoms, I'm guessing you would be like, okay, we need to run some tests here to look for these, like you said, like MS and a few other neurological conditions. And then when you reflected on it, you had things to do with your diet and, you know, and that's this emotional state, the mental emotional states that, I mean, it sounds like those things were the root cause. Would you agree?
Yeah, you know, I talk about 5 foundations. I think there's probably more, but it just helps me create a framework in my head when I'm thinking about my own life and my patients. And I talk about sleep, movement, rest, which is about managing our stress, connection to self, others, and purpose, and nutrition. And, you know, I think these are the foundations that underpin our well-being. And actually, they're about living by design. It's how we're designed to live, and that's how we can tap into that innate ability to heal. And, you know, and so for me, I'd already done a lot of work on sleep and stress. And you know, it's part of that healing. And I think the sort of nutrition and that connection piece was the next thing that just pushed me back, you know, into that healing process. And, you know, and so my body could do what it's brilliant at, which is heal and bring balance. And so for me, I hate protocols, and I hate, like, you know, five ways to do this. Like, it's all about personalized care. It's really listening to people's story and using maybe that framework to help, you know where to start with. So some people, they come with obesity, and actually I spent ages getting them to sleep, because I know until they are sleeping, they will never be able to make good decisions around nutrition, and their appetite hormones will be all over the place. So you know, but for other people that's fine, and actually we need to hone in on, you know, stress is the big thing, and disconnection from the land, I think, are real primary drivers in disease. So I do think sometimes people listen and think, oh, all right, I'm going to go and eat like she did. And it's like, no, it's not about me, it's about you. And it's about using these foundations. You know, where are you at, and what can you do to sort of move yourself towards health and healing?
Yeah, it's so interesting, isn't it, that, you know, you've come a long way in your journey and looking at those 5 things, but the average client or patient, they want one thing. You know, they want to be told just do this one thing. But I want to take it back slightly. You mentioned about nutrition, and prior to that, you had your sleep and rest quite well dialed in. Why do you feel like nutrition came to you a bit later? Is that to do with your training as a doctor, that nutrition isn't really taught, or was it, what was it about that came later?
We get no nutritional training. I mean, most of my colleagues think foods have got nothing to do with it, like to do with health. I mean, it's totally bonkers. And, you know, and we have been indoctrinated, you know, with horrible public health messages that have diminished food down to calories and fat. And we have lost the understanding around nutrient density, about eating for a healthy gut microbiome, how, you know, food influences our genetics, and how it's information to our bodies. And we have really, you know, diminished the role of food. And so I think I grew up in that. I grew up, you know, thinking that if I was thin, everything was fine, and the route to that was low fat, low calorie. And really, I think, you know, we starve ourselves not with calories, but all of those wonderful macro and micronutrients, and, you know, all those phytonutrients. And so it's complete ignorance. And up until, you know, 3 or 4, well, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I was completely ignorant of how we grew food and the impact, you know, glyphosates have, and, you know, where our food's coming from, and the intensive farming of you know, factory grown animals. And I had, you know, see, it's been this massive journey for me, one of understanding the beauty of food, you know, then about how it's grown, but then more, it's about culture, it's about gathering us, it brings us around the table, we celebrate our history, like it is the pause and the unifying thing. And so food to me is such a solution to so many of our problems. So yes, it's been a long journey, but ignorance and no training or understanding from a medical point of view.
It's so interesting you mentioned that it's about the community. And someone was telling me the other day that the root word of companion is con with, and pan being bread. So breaking bread with someone. It's like, oh yeah, companions and community. And so your interest in food and soil has led you to meeting some people, some interesting people, right? And some interesting movements in the UK. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so as I said, like I was merrily got my 5 foundations, and by this time I'd got a bit of a private clinic going, and was seeing some remarkable, results with my patients, and then what it was is we come from a foodie family. My family have got a Michelin-starred restaurant and estate, and it was my brother. A few years ago, was going on and on about the soil and how it impacts wine and biodynamic wine. And I was like, what on earth is he going on about? Like, what does it matter? Like, as long as you're eating real food, it really doesn't matter. And but he provoked my interest, and somebody put a book in my hands. I think it was Charles Massey's The Call of the Reed Warbler. And I had no idea at that point, again, totally ignorant, of intensive farming and our intensive farming systems, and how we have farmed over the last 70 years in order to feed us what was a starving nation, and then this massive focus on yield as a marker of success. And so I had no idea of how we were farming. And then to me, when I started to look at the soil microbiome, you will understand this, like our understanding of the gut microbiome has just been exponential, and the impact on health, and total fascinating area of research and the future, for health. And when you start looking at the soil, you see the same story. Like, the story of the farmer and the story of the doctor are the same story. We have a chemical way of doing health, and we have developed a chemical way of doing farming. And what we need to understand, that just as our body is wired to heal, and we need to live by design and work with it, the earth is wired for abundance, to feed with us. It can heal, but we have exploited it. And we have damaged it, but if we will work with it, it will heal, itself, it will heal us. And when you really look after the soil microbiome, it all starts with the soil. You get beautiful nutrient-dense food, which then feeds these animals, which are beautiful, nutrient-dense. And regardless of whether you want to just eat plants or meat or whatever, it doesn't really matter to me. You're then feeding your body. And we have this massive connection with landscape and the soil microbiome. And I think research will show, actually, eventually, that it is the soil that is influencing our own microbiomes, both on skin and eyes and gut, that is then training our immunity and keeping us disease free. But when we damage the soil, we are damaging our own connection and our own ability for our immune system to stay disease free. And so yes, and so went on this massive journey in the UK. Everything I was reading, it was Alan Savory's stuff in Zimbabwe, where I'd worked. It was Australia, it was America. And I was like, well, what on earth's going on in our country? And I literally Google searched farmers, and anybody that had the word regenerative, I didn't even know what it meant back then, or organic or biodynamic. I just phoned up and I said, look, I'm a doctor, and I think this really matters how you're growing, but I don't really understand what's going on. And they were just like, come and see us. And I have spent the last 4 or 5 years going around and seeing the healing of the land, and seeing these farmers transition or continue in these more traditional ways of farming, and seeing the impact on food quality, taste, biodiversity, the water in the soil. It is totally beautiful. And actually, it's been, what was unexpected for me was it was a massive spiritual journey, because it awakened in me our connection to our landscape, and it almost felt like coming home. And food to me, it takes on, I have a completely different relationship with it. It's not about commodity. It's, the gift of the earth, and the work of, men and women who grow that, and it connects me back to feeling more and more whole. So it's been a wonderful journey. And in the UK, we are very lucky to have incredible, family farmers across the nation who are farming like this.
Yeah, you are. And the UK is fascinating in that regard, because you come to North America, I was 15 years in Canada, you have these huge farms, these acreages they call them, and they don't farm them like we can in the UK, that regenerative way. Almost like they have to be smaller, and they have to have the right amount of sort of soil. And I know we've got Joe Salatin and people like that who are putting more topsoil on their land, but it's hard work. And a lot of farmers don't want to do it. But interestingly, I just interviewed someone who's on the podcast before this called Mike Dorian, who his tagline is "It all starts in the soil," and he is a soil expert. And he was telling me that there's this group out of the US who are developing a little probe that you can put in your vegetables, and they will tell you the nutritional profile of the vegetable in real time. And with the carrots that they've been testing on, there's a 200% difference between a commercially raised carrot with just the sort of the fertilizers and then these organically raised carrots. And the technology is going to develop so that you'll be able to put, this is what they're hoping to do, something on your phone that you could actually just attach the gizmo to your phone. You can go to the farmer's market, you can listen to the farmer talk about their techniques, and you go, okay, I'm just going to test your produce to see. And if that thing comes to the market, all farmers are going to have to up their game.
No, totally. That's Dan Kettridge's work with the
bionutrient. Okay, I didn't know who it was.
They have just created their prototype with the bionutrient density little scanner thing, hand scanner. So yeah, I mean, yes, it really isn't, it's going to change our power as consumers, which is what is needed to support, these smaller farmers. But sadly, like in the UK, things have got very big and very commercial. And we currently politically are about to lose a lot of our small family farms because we're losing our farming subsidies unless we as consumers start switching up how we're buying. So it isn't that different from the way America with these monoculture and massive fields and massive machines and
Well, they do say that the US leads in a lot of things. It's like 10 years or 15 years ahead. And I don't know whether the word ahead is appropriate, but I can see what you're saying there. It's like, okay, if that's coming to the UK, it's probably 10 years, 15 years behind what's already happened in the US. Yeah, interesting. So thank you for sharing that about your journey with food, but also you have another journey that I've been following with breath work. Can you tell us about that?
Yes. Oh gosh. So I read Patrick McGowan's book, so Oxygen Advantage. So, and I'm also very aware of oh gosh, what's the guy you follow? Has gone out of my head.
Wim Hof.
Wim Hof. Yes, sorry. Work and so again, just totally ignorant. We just don't learn about these things. So when you start looking at the science of, again, like keeping our body in this lovely rest and repair state predominantly, from that perspective, it was like, oh my goodness, breath work's just going to make a massive difference. And so again, like you read it, it's so intuitive, it makes sense. But I started practicing with it in my clinic, and I have been bowled away. Like I had a lady recently came to me with irretractable gut issues, and and she'd had so many tests and so many drugs, and nobody could help her. I was her last port of call, and I remember looking at her, because you start to look differently at people to how they breathe now, and you could just see she was locked down and her diaphragm was locked down, and no wonder she's got acid going up her flipping esophagus, given how tight she was. And so I was like, right, I think the first we need to do is open up your chest, and we need to start working on breath. And she was decided to go with it because she was so desperate. And I'm not joking, within 6 weeks she was symptom free, and just so it totally hooked me in. And then I see this with hormonal issues, I see this with a lot of gut issues and anxiety issues, and where practically I'm seeing something that you can do at your desk. It doesn't have to be weird. It is completely symptom free. You feel better almost immediately. But seeing this profound effect of when you get your body into that rest and repair zone, all of these things start to find their balance. And so I have a sixth foundation now, and it is breath work. I'm so convinced, like I have a breath work coach in clinic, and who is totally brilliant, but so convinced I'm now training in breath work, because it's a game changer for so many of my patients. So yes, very converted to using that as a very accessible tool to try and break into often, these difficult cycles that people are in with their lifestyle choices. And it's a nice thing to break into, to break the cycle of stress and sleep issues and rebalance the body. I love it.
Interesting.
But you're really into it, aren't you? And
Yes.
probably know far more than me. And
Well,
but yeah.
maybe not the science behind it as much, but Wim Hof for sure. I do Wim Hof breath work and the cold immersion. But yeah, just like treating clients. Like I had a patient a while back who had reflux, same as yours, but she'd also lost her menstrual cycle as well. She was 20, in her mid-20s. And so I lie people on the table because I'm an osteopath and we treat people sort of lying down some of the time. And I said, take a deep breath in. And she was like all up here and her belly did not move. And I was like, okay, just do that again. And I'm like, okay, now try and breathe in your belly. And she just couldn't do it. And so I gave her this exercise for belly breathing. And then same sort of thing, within like 2 or 3 sessions, her reflux had gone and she had been taking medication for that, which she stopped. And then her menstrual cycle came back. And it's like, okay, let's get you out of that that fight and flight, put in the rest and repair, and things sort of take care of themselves.
Yeah. So no, totally beautiful. And then I think for me also breath work offers that pathway to our unconscious and being more mindful and that kind of spiritual element of who we are, which we're just desperate to connect with. And a lot of us in the Western world don't know how to. They don't know how to find stillness. We don't know, accuse anybody. We don't know how to find that stillness. We don't know how to find that peace inwardly. We don't know how to hear our inner voice. And so I think I've also found it from that aspect, because I think what I'm really convinced of the more that I go into this, Ed, is that we know what we need.
Right.
Actually, if we can really listen, we know what we need to eat, we know we need to rest, we know, but we can't connect to that. And then there's the courage of actually living from that place of our inner sort of authentic voice. And breath work is just another beautiful gift. Yes, it helps us get out of that stress zone. Yes, it has these physical manifestations, but I think it's helping my patients draw inward on that inward journey to that place where they can have the confidence they can hear what they need. So I think there's a whole other level and layer in terms of a tool that's not weird, that we can all do, that really helps connect the whole of us so that we can live wholehearted and live as the powerful kind of beings that we are. So yeah, I think it's brilliant. I just love it.
There's actually another British guy who I think he lives in the US called Henry Shukman. He's a meditation coach, and he said something very profound, is that the mind can time travel. So you're always in the future or you're always in the past, but the body can't. And when you think of breathing, it's in the present. And so when you concentrate on your breath, it brings your mind back into the present. And it's like, oh, there it is. That's the key. To me, that was one of the keys for meditation right there.
And it's that thing, like we can only experience joy in the present and happiness here. And that's what we all want. We all want a bit more joy and a bit more kindness and a bit more sense of happiness, but we don't know how to get in the present. Yes. And so it is just, these wonderful tools. There's just so much great. And then there's also wonderful, neuroplasticity going on when we meditate, and all the wonderful chemical changes. And so, yeah, game changer.
It is. So, okay. So people listen to this, they've heard your story. They understand you're a general practitioner, or were a general practitioner. And now you're using lifestyle medicine. So can you give any of our listeners like some tips to say, okay, well, this is one thing that you've noticed is a really, really has really good effect. Like you mentioned the breathing, like what would you say that like the top 2 or 3 things that you can advise people?
Gosh, I think the overarching message is you can trust your body and it's for you. People have lost confidence. So people need to start drawing inwards and listening to what's going on and learn to listen to themselves. Like your body's totally for you. That's the big thing that we need to grapple with, like foundationally. And I think my observation from people and clients over the last 23 years is the quick wins are probably around breath and sleep, I think. That aggressively pursue, 7.5 to 9 hours asleep, not in bed, do it consistently for week on week on week, and within 3 or 4 weeks they will notice a radical shift in how they're feeling and that ability to make decisions in other areas. I think in order to get to that place of being able to sleep well, the biggest opposition to that, besides sort of blue light and caffeine, is that we're so stressed, and that's where breath comes into it. So I would say, learn about sleep hygiene, do it ruthlessly, make it the thing that you try to do, create a routine, get caffeine out of your diet, get the blue light out of, in those late in the evening, and then start doing breath work peppered through the day, because that's going to help bring your cortisol, your stress hormone, down, which is the thing that's often keeping us awake. So I think that's where you start. Trust yourself, tell yourself when you get out in the morning, my body is for me, I'm here, I'm not going to abandon you, what do you need? And then prioritize your sleep from the moment you get up. And then pepper your day with some simple breath work, and just do that 4 to 6 weeks, probably less, a couple of weeks, you'll start to feel better, if I'm really honest. And probably do it with somebody, that sort of accountability, and go on that journey of healing with somebody so you feel supported. Keep it really simple. You don't need thousands of supplements, you don't need to pay a lot of money, just start there. It would be my advice.
Brilliant. They say you can't sleep yourself. No, you can't eat yourself out of a bad sleep.
Yeah.
I think there's a hierarchy, isn't there? If you're not sleeping, you can eat everything that's correct, and you can exercise everything correct, but you're still going to get sick.
And sometimes we're using lifestyle to punish ourselves. We really need a kindness and a curiosity towards ourselves. And there's a time to run, there's a time not to run. There's a time to go and eat a bowl of ice cream and sit in front of a movie and sob your heart out, and there's a time not to do that. And I think it really is this kind of, we just need some kindness in life, towards ourselves and towards others. So
kindness and sleep, there you go. That's nice, isn't it?
That's what the doctor's prescribing.
Exactly. The doctor's prescribing kindness and sleep. Well, I tell you what, if more doctors prescribe that, I think we'd be in a better place.
Yeah.
Sally, where can people find you and find more information about you?
So I'm on most sort of social media platforms. My favourite's Instagram, and my handle's Dr. Sally Bell on all of them, and my website's drsallybell.com. So I have a small clinic, and I'm not quite sure what I'm doing with the next chapter of life. If I'm really honest, I'm kind of reevaluating, taking big pause at the moment, but that's where you can find me.
And do you help people online as well from different countries?
I do virtual appointments. There's certain limitations with people if it's from overseas, but we can talk about that. So I have to act as a lifestyle medicine practitioner, not a doctor in those contexts, but that's just all for legality. But I do see virtually and in person.
Wow. Well, thank you very much for sharing your journey and sharing the advice with us. I think people are going to find some real value in this recording, in this podcast. So thank you very much, Sally.
No, it's a pleasure. Thanks, Ed. It's been fab.
I hope you liked listening to Dr. Sally Bell as much as I did. If you did, show me some appreciation, and wherever you get your podcasts, whether it's on YouTube, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, please like and then subscribe. The more subscribers I get, the more of these podcasts I can make. I'll see you, or you can listen to me in the next one.